And we're back.
Hey, everybody.
What's up?
We are ready. Are you ready, Nance, for this topic? This is going to be a good one.
I am, and it's very timely. I don't know if our podsters know that many times we choose topics based on what's going on in our life. So the timing is cray-cray right now. So, Beth, you want to tell me what we're going to talk about?
We are going to talk about vulnerability. And I bet when you hear me say that, you're squirming.
I used to roll my eyes when I would hear that years ago. And now I don't. Now I know the power of it. I feel the power of it. I've experienced the power of it. And it's great timing because I'm feeling a little vulnerable today. And I'm going to share with you and the podsters why.
Okay.
So Beth already knows I didn't sleep well last night. I'm back to the fun, like waking up at 2 and not being able to get back to bed again, which is super fun. And when I get tired, I get very emotional. So if I burst into tears at some point during the podcast, that's why. The other reason this is really timely. And this happened, we come up with our topics usually about a week or so in advance. Just this week, after we decided to choose vulnerability, I got my first big troll on social media. Like sometimes I'll get people that say stupid stuff and whatever, like ridiculous. But this guy was coming at me and it was interesting. So I'll save it for the podcast.
Okay.
All right. So Beth, why don't we start with why was this topic hot for you?
Because for me, like working with people and their writing, one of the things I come up against is that they are not clear on their messaging. And one of the reasons that happens is that they don't want to dive a little deeper because that often involves exploring personal experiences and situations that actually are what make you unique and different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not easy to come up with your messaging or your content if you want to be authentic and genuine and to not be the same as everybody else. But people are vulnerable, right? Or like you said, they're afraid of cancel culture or a troll on their social media, or I don't know. They put a lot of value in the things people say that people they don't necessarily care about. It's hard to, I think, it's really challenging to, when that happens, to not react emotionally and personally and say, okay, I don't know this person. I don't really care what they think.
Mm-hmm.
And I can choose to block them. I can answer them factually. So I think when we're vulnerable, our first reaction is probably connected to your amygdala, right? As people say, not that we're psychologists here on the show, and so people react to protect themselves.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that people oftentimes as well won't set themselves up in the first place. So, if you think about it, you're rewarded for conforming.
Mm-hmm.
You start out as a baby, you are yourself. Then you're a toddler, you're yourself. You're a small child and you're yourself. And then about the age of 6, 7, 8, maybe, you start stepping into your personality and you're told, no, don't do that. You can't say that. You act like this, say this, do that. And particularly little girls, but little boys as well. So you learn to conform, and then you get to grade school and you learn that the more you conform, the more friends you get. Then you get to college or high school. I'm not even going to go to high school. Then you get to college and there's the sororities and the fraternities and the clubs. And it is lonely to stand in your own truth. It is. And to not conform. So then you go from college to the workplace where you're rewarded again with promotions, team dynamics, money. Some people's bonus is tied to how people perceive you. And you might need to mold yourself based on how you want to be perceived because you want to be accepted and perceived. So you really trained your whole life not to be who you are.
Yes. And I'm sure we've covered this before, but you're kind of trained to do what it takes to fit in instead of finding where you belong. And if you can find where you belong, Vulnerability is comfortable.
Can you say that again?
Yes. We've been taught all along to fit in. But instead of looking to fit in, if you find the space where you belong, vulnerability is much more natural and acceptable and positive for you.
I mean, that's the holy grail. Like that's the find your people or find your home or live your truth. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. So the podcast is over. That's it. Find where you belong and you will be able to be vulnerable.
Have a
Okay.
great day. Have a
Yeah.
great day, everyone.
Have a great day.
We all know in life we find ourselves in situations where maybe we don't belong, and how do we handle them, right? Like you were just saying, when you're on social media and this person is not necessarily somebody you belong with, but they have come along and kind of pushed into your space. So
yeah, and you just summarized it so beautifully. I think that's such a great way to summarize it. For me, I think I just lost my thought probably because I only got 2 nights of sleep. 2 hours of sleep. Once you step into who you are and let yourself be judged, really, that's what vulnerability for me, I can only speak for myself. For me, it's letting myself be judged, knowing that I'm going to be judged, honoring that is human behavior, and taking what works and letting go of the rest. Once you step into that, your life will never be the same, and you will never be happier. You're not happy 24/7, 100% of the day, but you think about how many of us go through life and do what we're told. Think about people who get married because on paper, that partner was the partner that was the best fit for them. And then finally, 10, 20, 25 years later, they understand that no, they need to take the risk and they need to be who they are and they need to take the mask down and take the armor off and go be themselves. It's actually kind of tragic if you think about it when you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable. What do you think of that?
yeah, I think it's a very scary and kind of insecure place to be in, right? Because
what's scary and insecure? Being vulnerable or living your whole life not being vulnerable?
well, I think either. I think it's also a lonely life, never allowing yourself to be vulnerable, because you're never going to have genuine relationships with people. I think that being vulnerable and sharing part of yourself with somebody, whether it's a friend or a partner or anybody in your life, you're showing someone that you trust them.
Mm-hmm.
By being vulnerable. And then in turn, they are more likely to also trust you. And this is how you build strong relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
By being open and getting to know somebody on a deeper level. And, it might just be a business relationship, but you're still building more of, I don't know if loyalty is the right word. I don't necessarily love to use the word loyalty, but you're just building a relationship where there's this foundation of trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. I would use the word connection. I don't know if that's strong enough because you can connect with people, but still not. Well, I don't know about that. Maybe not. The connection though is that gets tied back to everything. So that gets tied back to your ability to influence outcomes. That's tied back to your authenticity. It's tied back to your charisma, like we talked about a couple episodes ago. What's interesting is, to me, if you were not shown how to be vulnerable when you were growing up, I would suggest, and I love your opinion on this, that somebody needs to show you. I think you don't. I think in many cases you don't know how because you never saw it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think vulnerability also has to do with emotion. So if you are someone who maybe is high functioning on the spectrum, let's say, and again, I'm talking from personal, my own personal knowledge or experience, which is limited, but I do have someone in my life who's disconnected emotionally. And then if you are someone who's in more of an analytical statistic sort of field, right? Like just in working with clients, if I'm writing for someone who's got like that engineer mind, their mind is based on data and analytics and the factual, like hard deliverables. And they don't think about the emotional piece of it. So I do think that they don't realize, and people like that might need some help, right? That's, to me, that's where a lot of people sometimes professionally, and you can of course add in, need that sort of executive coaching of with communication. I see that a lot with executive coaches, that you go in, you have these really bright people, real brilliance and genius, but they spent so much time developing that, or being encouraged to develop that, that they don't necessarily have the social and emotional piece. I hope I said all of that appropriately.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. And some of it is their nature, and some of it is the facade they put on when they come to work. So I remember I was coaching a CEO who is a wonderful human being and put a total armor up because she thought she had to. And she was very good at her job. She was excellent at her job. She could not connect with her team because she would not allow herself to show herself and be vulnerable like that. And it really it impacted her, and it impacted her negatively, and it impacted her career trajectory, and it impacted her ability to lead. She could still lead, but you have to connect with people. That's what they want. That's why they will follow you into battle, or they'll follow you wherever you go, is if you have that relatability and that connection with them. That's what people gravitate towards. It is.
Well, and let me ask you this. So let's say that you are vulnerable, you do build relationships this way. I think one of the benefits is, if you go on social media, or you send an email, or you communicate in some way where, hey, maybe you're having a tough day and you're a little bit snippy, that person will know, you know what? I know that's not how Nancy normally is. So A, I'm going to have grace for her, and B, I'm going to reach out and see, how can I help? Is there anything going on for her?
Yes, totally. Totally. It's that trust, and it's that expectation. And do you remember Stephen Covey?
Yes.
The Covey Bank, I call it. For those of you who haven't heard of him, which I guarantee you there's probably 27% of our listeners who haven't, he wrote several great leadership books back in the, I think, 80s. One of them was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Anyway, what he says is, you do enough for other people so that when you need something, you have that goodwill banked. It's in a bank. So you can withdraw from the bank because you put enough deposits into the bank. So with the vulnerability, if you're being vulnerable and you're showing your true self, first of all, people want to help. They want to help you. And second of all, to your point, what you just said was, they know that they'll give you a pass, and they'll know that's not really who you are. I think you brought up a really, really good point. I want to go back though to because I feel it's important to say this. I might get emotional. Okay, here I am, 2 hours sleep. So if you're not modeled this, right? So I wasn't, and I'm not going to get into the details on that because it'll get me in trouble, but I wasn't. It was Danny. It was my husband now that really, really, leading by example, showed me what it meant to totally be raw with another person, and to put your heart into someone else's hands. And that's despite everything that's happened. So for those of you that are a little younger in your years, and you're in relationships, and should I say this or shouldn't I say that? Yes, say it. Because A, that's the true you, and B, it is an amazing gift to give someone. It's an amazing gift to give someone, to say, here is all of who I am. Take it. Please don't destroy me, because you could.
Right.
Please don't. Wild, huh?
It is wild.
Yeah.
It is wild.
Yep. How about at work? So I'm trying to think about, if you own your own business, yes, the more authentic and vulnerable you are, I think the more you'll get. You're obviously being your true self, and with your personal brand and your messaging and all of that. I also think you'll be able to identify the holes in your business faster if you can say, here's what I really want, here's what I don't want, here's what I like to do, here's what I don't like to do. I don't want to work that hard. I only want to work 20 hours a week. Okay, say it. Say it so you can design your business around it. If you're in a corporate environment, again, I think it goes back to leading teams, building trust, and that human connection. And you can never go wrong with the connection. You will always, it doesn't matter if you're a leader, it doesn't matter if you're not a leader. The more you connect with someone, the more they will go out of their way to help you and to support you. And that will lift you up your entire career, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's true. I mean, and so part of vulnerability, right? A huge piece of it is honesty, right? You don't want to go in somewhere into a job or a career where you want to grow and you want opportunity. When you're vulnerable and honest with somebody and say, you know what, like for me, I'm going to use this kind of a silly example, but I hate to work in spreadsheets. So if somebody says to me, oh, we're going to track such and such in a spreadsheet, I'm going to say right up front, listen, just so you know, this does not work in my brain. I'm going to give it my best shot.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard for me. I'm willing, right? Or I'm willing to learn X, Y, and Z if that's what I really need to be successful in this position, or I'm not willing to, because then you're letting someone know where you need support and that you're willing to get that support and try harder.
Totally. And I like that you use the word honesty because, earlier I said that when people used to say vulnerability, I would roll my eyes. I equated it to mushy, woo-woo, people sitting around in a circle and sharing their one true meaning or whatever, which over the past 10, 15 years, maybe I think the perception of that word has changed a little bit. Thank you, Brene Brown, again. And, the workplace has changed and values have changed and the world has changed. And I like that you said honesty because it's not a weakness. And I think some people, maybe men, we'd love to hear from the men on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, they're told to be tough and don't let them see you sweat and never show your emotions. And if you cry, you're a wussy or whatever. That's simply not true. And that's an old track that I would hope has been significantly changed.
Mm-hmm.
And also at the same time, I still see it. I still see men being the tough guys. And I think about some of my male friends who are the tough guys. And then they say something, if my wife ever left me, I'd be dead in the water or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it endears them to me. I think that's a good way to put it. It endears people to you and it makes them connect with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Oh gosh, I just had a thought and I'm holding on to the tail end of it.
Oh, we should have like little thought Post-its or thought bubbles or something.
I know, right?
Do we have a chat? Maybe we can throw it in the chat. I don't know. I don't think we have a chat. We do. Yeah. I think particularly, I would like to say particularly at home, but in both places, like especially after we came through the pandemic, human connection's never been more important. Again, if you're a leader and you tell your team, I don't know that, but I'll find out the answer, or I don't know. That's people like that. They like the newscaster, Nancy, right? The perfectly polished, always has the answer. Never, let them see you sweat. That's done. That's 80s. That's 80s.
It is. And what's really interesting, so I used to have a job where I did these art presentations. It was an art awareness company, mostly for entertainment's sake, but after a while you get pretty knowledgeable, right? You're talking about the art world and you're talking about all these artists and movements and all that sort of stuff. I actually learned much more about history in the time that I had this job. And there would be times when people who were 20 or 30 years older than me, really well traveled, really well versed in history, would ask me a question and I wouldn't have the answer. And actually my boss pretty much was like, there are ways to like be very general and fudge around that. And I'd be like, no. And I would say to the person, you know what? That is an excellent question. And I don't know the answer to it. I can find out afterwards, but does anyone in our audience have the answer to this question? And then you give somebody else the opportunity to feel good because you're being vulnerable and they can support you by helping you with the answer.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So let me ask you this. And I know that the person I worked for was very much like, don't let them know that you don't have this information, always be the authority and always be the one in control and everything. And I can see that, but if you are someone who's never vulnerable and you don't let that happen, I would think that there are many things about that would amplify imposter experience.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
So if you're vulnerable and you're able to say, you know what? Guess what? I don't like to fold bed sheets and I hate spreadsheets, but you know what? I'm a damn good writer. Then I can look at, I'm human, I have flaws. I'm going to be upfront and honest with you, but I'll tell you what I'm really great at.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And as you were saying it, I was thinking about imposter feeling or imposter, what'd you call it? Situation?
Experience.
Thank you. And I was thinking about, it's about managing expectations. So sometimes I'll start a discussion with somebody if I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'll say, I'm not the expert here. And at the same time, I think we can have a really good conversation or productive conversation.
Yeah.
Boom, just managed expectations. I'm not the expert. Rather than coming in and trying to bullshit someone, particularly at work, when the stakes could be pretty high, just admit it. I'm not the expert. Okay. What are they going to say? Well, then you know what? I'd like to cancel the meeting and let's find a real expert.
Okay, great. Right? I mean, thank God I don't have to fudge. I don't have to get on and be dishonest or struggle or be uncomfortable because I'm talking about something that I really have no business talking about. And I think that that's a great point because in a situation like that, you open yourself up and you're vulnerable. It leads you to collaboration and brainstorming. And then you're working together on an equal plane, trying to figure out, what is it that you're working on? So
yeah, as you were saying that, I thought of something else during an interview. If you aren't honest, AKA make yourself be vulnerable to the truth, which might be you don't have experience in this one area. You want them to know the true you because you want to succeed in the role and you want to make sure it's a good fit and you want to make sure that you can do it and that you'll enjoy doing it. So, if I am so blown away if I'm interviewing someone and they say, you know what, that's not really an area of my expertise. Great. Now I know. And in my head, what I'm thinking is, okay, do I have the bandwidth and do I have the money to get them trained in this area? Do I have the resources to get them what they need so that they get more well-versed in this area? Usually the answer is yes, because it's not that big of a deal. And if it is a big deal, then that person's not a fit. And let's find out now versus 6, 7, 8 months down the line when we're all even more invested.
Exactly. And guess what? You're doing that person a favor at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I have 2 calls to action if you don't have anything else. Do you have anything else?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So the first one is at work. For Podsters, take a look at someone who you feel allows themselves to be vulnerable and see what it is that they're doing and just consider if you can do that as well. That's one thing. And then at home, this is a big one because this has been really big for me over the past 10 years. Not a coincidence that I met Danny 10 years ago. Say the thing you're afraid to say. It's that simple. Say, I'm afraid of failing, or what if I do this and it ruins whatever, or my biggest fear is this, or I think I'm acting this way because this is what I'm thinking. It's only going to bring you closer to that person, build a partnership, and make you both better. Right?
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
What do you think? Got anything to add?
That oftentimes we feel vulnerable about things and they are bigger in our minds than they actually are. So I actually think just taking some time to write for a few minutes and think of something that makes you feel vulnerable, that you've kind of been toying with of, I really want to say this or share this, but I'm afraid of X, Y, and Z, and write it down and really look at it factually and maybe separate, maybe facts and feelings, 2 different rows, my favorite things, and really look at realistically, why are you vulnerable? Is it that big of a deal? Is it something that you can work on? Is it something you want to work on? Because that's a big thing too. That's one of the places where you can take control with vulnerability. And then maybe write down the feelings, or like you just said, what's the worst thing that could happen? Or what do you think is going to happen? And then once you write it down, you'd be like, well, that sounds really silly. Right? And this is not a big deal.
Can I add to that? Can I tack on to you? I would also suggest you write down what's the best case scenario. I just went through this with a friend. She was focusing on the worst case scenario, which I get, and we need to do that. So let's play that out, right? Is somebody going to die? Probably not.
Right.
I don't want to minimize serious medical conditions. If you don't get the promotion, what's going to happen? Okay. And then you play that out. Let's focus instead on the best case scenario, because that's the energy you're going to put out in the world. And that's what's going to make you more excited about it. That's going to support you and remind you who you are. And that's focus on the best case scenario. Why waste that energy on what you don't want to happen?
So true.
Right?
So true. Awesome.
I just did the snap. I think that's a great wrap. What do you think?
I think so. Excellent.
Okay. What do we get in the show notes? So we have my confidence community, my group, and you have your group. Is yours an ongoing Facebook group?
Yep. My Facebook group, Better Content Right Now.
Great.
People can join.
Okay. Should we tell the Podsters what they're in for the next few episodes? What we have on deck? I have it up. Should we tell them?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay. We have communication styles that may be holding you back. We have, listening skills. Beth has a one-on-one interview with a listening coach. How cool is that?
That's awesome.
Oh, we have don't squash what makes you unique. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit about seasons. Whoops, sorry. What was that?
I said, we have some good ones coming up.
We do. Seasons. And then this is going to be a good one. I want to get under this whole introvert extrovert thing because I can't get my head around it. And I understand it's a basic concept. I need to figure this out.
Okay.
All right. Boom. Drop the mic. Peace out. Thank you, Podsters. Thank you, Podsters. Thank you, Podsters. And thank you, Beth.
All right.
Bye-bye.